Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 737. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about Shakers and Shays Rebellion, Mills and Minutemen, Poets and Pilgrims as we go to the state of Massachusetts.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Massachusetts. I'd like to welcome the show Henry Suski from Middletown, Connecticut, a patron of the show, I might add, who has come to talk to us about the neighboring state of Massachusetts. Henry, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you.
And I should ask, first of all, what's your connection with Massachusetts other than it's right over there?
Yeah, so I was born there and I've been traveling the state my entire life.
Excellent. And why should someone go to Massachusetts?
Well, it represents America. We've had people that have come to Massachusetts over 400 years ago, and they've gone to all corners, and there's just been tremendous turnover. So if you know where to look, you're going to see all sorts of different movements, ideas, institutions, museums, and also the nature is stunning too.
Excellent. And we should point out there were people in Massachusetts when those other people came too. But so there have been people in Massachusetts for some time now.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
The reason I said it that way is because for the more recent people, you can see things that were constructed,
exactly,
and things in the landscape. My idea was that there's different regions and there's quite a number of differences. There's the landscape and also what's available there as well. So it's going to go from west in the Berkshires going east to the Cape and Islands.
And I guess I should say, what are we not going to talk about today?
Well, we're not going to talk about Boston, which...
Because you hate Boston. Is that right?
Nope. I love Boston. And for people who are traveling, Boston is very much on the beaten trail.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to talk about are all the wonderful things that are off the beaten trail.
And if you're interested in information on Boston, we do have 2 episodes on Boston, one of them recently, and that's the reason why we're not talking about Boston in this show. Excellent. You're going to start us in the West and the Berkshires. Where are the Berkshires?
Okay.
In the West.
Yes. It's the westernmost county. And this is an interesting place because over 100 years ago, all the wealthy New York people and people from other cities, it was just really hot in the summertime. And so they wanted to go somewhere and not sweat and mostly not smell the smells that were in the city summertimes. So what they actually did during the Gilded Age was build cottages, which I put in parentheses because these are really mansions. And this is really under the radar because it's a cultural playground. There's amazing summer theater. Boston Symphony is an orchestra at Tanglewood, and it's about $20. You can bring picnics. There's a really funny skit on Portlandia about people bringing like their entire house, setting up and then leaving. And popular day at Tanglewood is James Taylor does a 4th of July concert. Jacob's Pillow.
That. Okay.
Sells out right away, so you really need to be in the loop for that. Jacob's Pillow is an international dance festival, and acts come from all over the world. And that has 2 months of programming where you're going to have a different performance every single night. And some of the top-notch theater are Barrington Stage Company, Shakespeare and Company, and Williamstown Theater Festival, where popular film actors actually perform. Yeah, and it's just beautiful to go around. It's picturesque landscapes, rolling hills, forest fields, historic homes, and the landscaping for the homes are really good as well. And starting from the south, there's a couple of things to check out. The Norman Rockwell Museum, which is part of Americana, based on the illustrated magazines that he did a lot of work for. And Chesterwood.
And that's in Stockbridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah, that is correct.
I've been there. It's a fun museum. If you are at all familiar with Rockwell's work, or it's a fun place to go.
Yes. Near there's Chesterwood, which is the home of sculptor Daniel Chester French. And he's known for the statue of Abraham Lincoln in Washington, D.C., and also the Minuteman statue in Concord, which references the Revolutionary War. I know you asked for lodgings, and I would say that Pittsfield is the best place to stay. And I think that 1 to 2 days in the Berkshires suffices. And Pittsfield's more central, and it's going to have some budget options because the Berkshires can be pretty pricey depending where you go. And near to Pittsfield's, one of the things that is really great about Massachusetts is that there's a lot of famous authors that were from here. And we have a twofer with the Mount, which is Edith Wharton's home. It's a Gilded Age cottage, and she's a famous author, the first woman to receive a Pulitzer for Age of Innocence. So for those people that are involved in hiking, the Appalachian Trail goes through here. And yeah, that's a really nice stretch of it. And in general, if you're in Massachusetts, there's a couple of organizations that I recommend for hiking. The Trustees of Reservation, it's the oldest land conservation organization. It started in 1891, and there's 120 properties. And also Mass Audubon has 57 properties. And what's interesting about those are the trails are just really beautiful and scenic. I mean, there's also the state forest. 10% of Massachusetts land are state forests. So it's actually it's pretty high considering that Massachusetts is the 7th smallest state. And when you've done your hiking, you can relax. There's people that come from all around to go to the spas, such as Kripalu and Cranwell.
Okay. And those are where?
Cranwell is in Lenox and Kripalu is in Stockbridge. And these are very close to the museums that are in the Southern Berkshires that I mentioned, the Norman Rockwell and also Chesterwood.
Excellent. Anything else we want to do in the Berkshires area?
Yeah, actually, I'm just moving north.
You're just getting started. Okay.
Yeah. And believe me, when taking a look at things to do, mostly I was just choosing things that were interesting to people from other parts of the country. There's a lot of strong regional attractions that I'm skipping. In Pittsfield, Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick at his home in Arrowwood. And a little close to that, near the New York border, is the first of many living history museums, Hancock Shaker Village. Shakers are celibate, so it's not a surprise that the numbers dropped off and many communities ended.
That is true.
And when they say, if these walls could talk, these walls probably don't say a lot. But
Yes.
the
Okay.
location's great. They have a lot of buildings on site. They're known for their crafts. Shaker crafts are really popular with furniture aficionados, and you can actually purchase them there as well.
Well, and if people are not familiar with the Shakers, you mentioned they are known for their crafts and their celibacy. They would adopt children actually to try and carry on the Shaker, I don't want to say religion because it's a Christian sect, but they were also known for their style of worship, which involved shaking. That they would literally, that's where the name comes from, or the nickname came from, similar to the Quakers. Actually, it was the style of worship that gave them that name. And probably the Shakers and the Quakers are closest to each other in terms of Christian sects, in terms of their style of worship.
Also, the other thing, too, is that the buildings, they're about early 1800s. So there's different living history museums. And what's interesting is that they highlight different time periods. So there's not really going to be a lot of overlap between them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And lastly, for the Berkshires, in the northeast corner, Williamstown is a picturesque New England college town with top-tier college, Williams College. And their art museum is really good. And I mentioned this area because the Clark Institute of Art has a world-class collection there and wonderful grounds to explore. And nearby in North Adams is one of the largest contemporary art museums in the country, MassMoCA. And if you love former factory buildings as much as I do, and I believe you've mentioned you like those as well.
I do.
Massachusetts has a bunch of them. And so this museum is on the Sprague Electric Company. There's 26 buildings on site, and it's a spectacular setting for outdoor live music, which they offer concerts with the small mountains that surround it. And there's a movie that just came out called Museum Town about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and just in general, the former industrial cities like North Adams, they're gateway cities, and they all have museums that are part of the DCR network, which is the hiking and conservation arm of the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah, and this would be an area that would have been sort of central for manufacturing probably early 1800s. I know that's true for the town just over the New York border here of Troy, New York, where I went to college. Went to college fairly near to North Adams.
Yeah, awesome. Well, moving east, what would be next is Pioneer Valley, and that hugs the Connecticut River. And starting in the south, for people who are sports fans, there's actually two sports that were created by former YMCA instructors at Springfield College. Most people know Dr. Naismith, who invented basketball, and that museum is in Springfield, and it's definitely worth a visit. Holyoke also has the Volleyball Hall of Fame, and that's a smaller collection, but that is where it started. So that is something worth a visit for people who are volleyball fans. And the other attraction is the Springfield Armory. That's one of two that were used in the Civil War in addition to Harper's Ferry. And Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote the famous poem, The Arsenal at Springfield, because the muskets reminded him of organ pipes. And you can see like all these different types of movements that existed. And Shays' Rebellion, which was in 1787, that was considered to be one of the principal reasons to have the politicians toss out the Articles of Confederation. There's mixed information on that, so no tweets, please.
Well, and for those who are listening who are not from the U.S. or who don't remember their U.S. history, you may or may not remember that when the U.S. first gets started, it is not a federalist kind of form of government like we have now. It is more like the European system, which is more loosely configured, or maybe the European system 20 years ago or something like that. And we were under the Articles of the Confederation. And so if you'll notice, the first line in the Constitution is in order to form a more perfect union, and the less perfect union was the Articles of Confederation, which was basically 13 separate countries that worked together, and not so well. So, yeah, Shays' Rebellion was one of the things that pointed that out.
In nearby Chicopee, there is an underappreciated gem of a museum called the Polish Center. And part of Massachusetts history is that all the mill towns got their employees from different European countries who were escaping famine and all sorts of reasons. So you notice large groups of Irish, Portuguese, Polish, French Canadians are among the groups that came after 1880s and later on. There were blacks during the Great Migration and Puerto Ricans later on as well. So you'll notice that in all of the former mill cities. And one thing, too, that is good if you're in late September, early October, people always enjoy a good state fair. Well, we have a state fair for 6 states. It's
Really?
called the Big E. Yeah, it's the Big E, and we have about 1.5 million people that come every season.
And what are these 6 states? So I'm guessing...
New England.
Okay, all right.
Yes, for people outside
Nebraska
of the country.
does not take part. Okay, fair enough.
Even though the initials for Nebraska and New England are the same. Going further north is one of the most progressive areas in the U.S., which is Northampton, Amherst, hugs the Connecticut River. And there's 5 colleges, and 3 of them are top-rated, Mount Holyoke and South Hadley, which is a really beautiful campus and a good art museum. Also Smith College in Northampton, which has a museum to visit as well, and Amherst College. And Amherst is also the home of Emily Dickinson, a famous reclusive poet, and you can visit her house. And children book authors would love the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. Northampton's one of the most interesting small towns in the U.S., and it's got a strong music scene, lots of independent shops and art galleries. And I mentioned movements here in 1730s as part of the religious revival, the Great Awakening. Jonathan Edwards preached sinners in the hands of an angry God. And later in 1843, Sojourner Truth came to the abolitionist utopian community that was there. One last stop is historic Deerfield. It's an outdoor museum with buildings from the 1700s. And one of the key things that they highlight are the French and Indian Wars, which has not been renamed as far as I know.
Well, not in the U.S. The French and Indian Wars has a different name in Europe, and I'll look that up because I don't remember. For our European listeners, it is called, I think, the War of the Spanish Succession, but I can never quite remember that.
One last thing I forgot to mention. So the 5 colleges, for fans of Scooby-Doo, each of the different characters represent one of the colleges.
What?
So Fred, he represents Amherst College.
Okay.
Shaggy is Hampshire College. Daphne is Mount Holyoke. Velma is Smith. And Scooby is UMass, which was my alma mater.
One thing we haven't talked about is we haven't talked about so much the geography of this western part that we've got so far. We mentioned the Berkshires is a mountain range, small mountains, New England mountains, so not really tall, but also every place we've talked about a mill town or an old industrial town in this region in the U.S., you can pretty much count on that was water power. And so you're looking at some place that has a river and probably a valley or some place that the river is going to be flowing downhill so that it can power mills.
No, that's an interesting point. And even when you're going to small towns where you think that it's all woods, when you go through the forest, you can actually see former remnants of mills. Anywhere with a drop in elevation, even 10 feet, about 300 years ago, there was like a small little mill that was taking advantage of that power. Right. And you'll find those remnants all over if you know to look for them. Oh, yeah. And geographically, in between the Berkshires and also the Pioneer Valley, for people who want a really rural experience, there's 30 towns that there's not even a single red light. There's not a straight road there. It's all going incline and twisting. And that's a good way to kind of just get some peace.
Well, and I want to pause here for a second and say, what time of year do you recommend going here? Because you were talking about the Berkshires in summer being specifically, if you're looking for culture, that's when you would go. And I know I've been to Amherst in the fall, and it's just drop dead gorgeous. I know there's a waterfall outside of town, and I remember being there with all the fall colors. What is your favorite time of year in this area?
I would recommend, just for collectively all the different areas that I'm going to mention, it would be September, shoulder season. And that will become apparent when I talk about Nantucket.
Okay.
I did want to touch briefly on food. There are some dishes that New England are known for, and they're not really the most interesting. I mean, baked beans. New England clam chowder is definitely the best of the different chowders. And closer to Boston, I would say that roast beef is really good. Definitely not like the chain restaurant, which I will not name.
Okay.
But in general, the thing about Massachusetts is that there's a lot of communities that existed before automobiles. So you're going to find a lot of independent places, both for stores and restaurants, and just use Yelp to find those places. And in addition, there's a lot of people from other countries that have come. So international food is pretty good, and to look out for those.
Okay.
So Central Mass, that's more of a stopover. While going east, you could stop for some good Brazilian food. One of the top rated beers in the world, Treehouse, is there. And the Clara Barton Birthplace Museum might be of interest to some people. She founded the Red Cross. And the largest living history museum is Old Sturbridge Village. And that recreates village life from 1790, 1830. And they have a lot of interpretive staff there who will not understand your modern ways.
All right.
Continuing north of Boston, I would recommend just starting from Boston and going north. It's one of my favorite places in the state by far. It's got different scenery due to abutting the Great Marsh. I've heard that it's one of the largest marshes on the eastern seaboard, but I couldn't verify it online. And a lot of the other marshes have been developed, as land near the sea is top dollar typically with development. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted to get outside and enjoy that, the Greenbelt has many nature properties. You could check it out.
And when you say the Greenbelt, we're talking about a series of parks that surround Boston like a green belt.
No, actually, the Greenbelt is the Essex County Conservation
Group. Okay. Because we also talk about the Greenbelt in Boston. So I'm glad I asked.
Yes, and there are long-distance hiking trails in addition to the Appalachian Trail, and there is one that does surround the Boston area.
Okay.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com. And don't just travel, explore.
And by the way, while we're paused here, the French and Indian War is also associated with the 7 Years' War in Europe. I was wrong in terms of which one, and although some people treat it as a different conflict, which I did not know.
Yes. With Massachusetts, the early maritime communities, as a lot of wealth came from sea trade. And in Massachusetts, those towns have kept a lot of the historic characters. So I'm going to start going through some of those. First stop, immediately north from Boston, I'd recommend is the Saugus Iron Works, which were the first ones in the U.S. It's a national park, and they started in 1646.
Wait! You can't just talk about a national park and talk about it that quickly, because you're talking about one of my favorites. I love Saugus Iron Works. I think we mentioned it in the episode we did in Boston also, but it's just one of those cute little national historic sites that won't take you even an hour probably to visit, but you can see when things are working, a working mill-driven iron works where the mill water is used to operate the bellows, and the giant hammers are used to make cast iron. And it's a fascinating place. It's an operating ironworks. At least it was operating last time I was there. It's a recreation. They had to rebuild it because it was not a commercial success, and so the old ironworks had been gone for some time. But fascinating national park.
All right, awesome. Regarding early maritime communities, and these are also some of the wealthiest communities in the country at the time. Marblehead, which is a summer sailing destination. It has 200 homes pre-Revolutionary War, all in the downtown, and it's really compact. And beautiful place to stay, not a budget option location. Salem, known for the witch trials, is much more than that. An early wealthy port, sailors brought treasures from around the world, and that led to the splendid Peabody Essex Museum, which is the oldest continuously operating museum in the country. They did an expansion not too long ago, which I haven't been able to visit yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And it's one of the major repositories for Asian art collections in the U.S. Another National Park Service is in Salem, and now that I know that you like those so much, I won't go too fast.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's the first one in the U.S. from 1938. It's the Salem Maritime National Historic Site. Must see. A lot of it you can see for free and on foot.
Which also includes a frigate that you can go on. I believe it's a frigate, but a sailing ship.
Yes. I cannot tell which class of ship it is, but...
A frigate would have 3 masts, and I'm looking at a picture of 3-masted sailing ships, so I think that's what we're talking about.
Awesome. All right, and also in town is the House of Seven Gables. It's a 1668 house you can visit, and it was made famous by Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote the book. And Rockport, which is nearby, is a very pretty small village with art galleries and small shops. And it's known for the fishing shack motif number 1. Lots of people have done it. If you've seen it, you would probably recognize it. And there's also the paper house, which is made of paper, not something that you see all the time. I can't remember if the outside is made of paper too, but definitely everything on the inside is.
Okay.
And Halibut Point State Park is in Rockport as well. It's a really pretty quarry by the sea, and you can explore the trails there.
Yeah, and once you're at Rockport, you're out on the Cape Ann Peninsula, which is one of the peninsulas that heads out into the Atlantic there. The whole area is very pretty.
Yes. Actually, I was going to mention Gloucester, which is also on that cape, and it has one of the oldest continuous operating art colonies. And a lot of big-name artists that people will recognize were here in the early 20th century. Essex is for the antiquers, with over 30 shops within a mile. And Ipswich invented the fried clam, and that is definitely a must. And whole belly, not clam strips.
Okay.
My recommendation.
Okay.
Castle Hill on the Crane Estate. It's a wonderful property. It has a house that is up on a bluff, and then there's this arcade-like lawn that just slopes down into the sea. And there's also a really pretty beach on the property that you can take a look at. And as I mentioned before, lodging is not cheap here. So if you're looking to stay someplace, you probably have to go to one of the suburbs closer to Boston. The area is very undeveloped, so that's part of the reason.
Okay.
If you swing inland, this is not the North Shore, Lowell was a planned city. There's more than one planned cities in Massachusetts that got created in the 1800s for industry. And it has a functioning mill where you actually have to wear earplugs because it's very loud.
The only national park that I am aware of that comes with earplugs. Yes, that is correct. And the first mills in the U.S., and so this is where the Industrial Revolution comes to the U.S. is in Lowell, and it's a fascinating national park if you are interested in American history.
Yes, and it's also diverse. So if you're interested in interesting food options, for instance, the U.S.'s second largest Cambodian population lives here.
Okay, that's random.
And the beat writer Jack Kerouac, who wrote On the Road, was born here, and so there's some monuments to that. So I mentioned that we're not going to do Boston, but in the greater Boston area, while you're going south to the next destination, Lexington and Concord is of interest for the Revolutionary War history nerds. And there's several interesting house museums for famous authors. Louisa May Alcott of Little Women, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau's Walden Pond. And there's a sculpture museum by the name of D. Cordova that is nice. And I've mentioned some things which involve structures. So if you wanted to just go on a bike path, the Minuteman bike path is a nice change of pace. There's some esoteric museums that people may not have heard of before in the area. There's the Museum of Bad Art.
I think I've been to that, although not that particular branch of it.
Gotcha. The Museum of Russian Icons in Clinton, which I haven't gone to yet, but I love Russian icons. It's got all the gilt painting, and let's see, the Spellman Museum of Stamps in Weston.
How does one determine what gets into the Museum of Bad Art? I have to wonder.
I mean, when you see it, you can tell, right?
Oh gosh, I'm looking at pictures. Yes. All right.
Now we would be heading south, and this is going towards the Cape and Islands. What's interesting about this region is even though there's a major city nearby and pretty dense, you'll still find some really small village-like communities nearby. And that's because people in Massachusetts don't really like to change things very easily. So there's a strong current of saving things and buildings and structures. And that's what makes it interesting, because in a lot of other places, those may have been torn down for development. So if you go on the South Shore, you'll see historic seaside villages that still remain. And while you swing by World's End in Hingham, it's a beautiful trail with views of the Boston skyline. It's part of the Boston Harbor Islands National Recreation Area. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about this place, it was actually a proposed site for the United Nations and a nuclear power plant. And
hopefully not in the same proposal, but
I think they were pretty similar in time. Further south, there's Plymouth, which has the famous Plymouth Rock. And this is the one thing that I will say.
Underwhelming, I'd have to say.
I was just going to say that. Most of everything that I said were more things that were hidden gems and things that people may not have known about. But Plymouth Rock is small. And you're like, really? I came all the way here to see this.
It's a rock. It says a year on it, 1625. That's it. Now you can skip it.
Right. Well, that was a very successful marketing campaign. But the Plymouth Patuxent Museum, that is definitely worth going to. It was formerly known as Plymouth Plantation, and it's a living history museum from the 1600s.
Got it. That's the one I'm familiar with. Yeah, that is much better.
Yes. And also in this area, New Bedford was one of the other really wealthy maritime cities. Made its money from whale oil, and the whaling museum there is great. And if you swing by there, nearby Fall River has the purportedly haunted Lizzie Borden house, where the gruesome killings of her parents makes it renowned.
Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her father 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her mother 41, if I've got the poem close.
Yes. Your honorary Massachusetts citizenship card is in the mail.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
And also, I'd say that Battleship Cove, it's the world's largest collection of World War II naval ships.
What?
Yes.
I don't know this. And I say this with surprise. So for those who don't know, not only did I go to college near Massachusetts, but I have had a job in an office in Massachusetts for 4 of the last 7 years. But I commuted from California. So I've spent a fair amount of time in Massachusetts. So tell me more.
I'm not a military buff.
Okay.
There's big ships there.
And are they there for preservation? Looks like. And it looks like you can find the USS Massachusetts landing craft, a submarine, looks like a destroyer, a PT boat similar to the PT-109 that John Kennedy would have been on, a famous son of Massachusetts. Excellent. No, I did not know that one.
I've mentioned the different types of landscapes. If you're in this area, you could do a quick jaunt along the coast towards Rhode Island. This is beautiful and historic farmland that just rolls into the sea. Continuing on, going east to Cape Cod.
And before we go to Cape Cod, the other one thing we skipped over for those who are interested in a more American history, and again, we're skipping things. There's a lot of American history here, including the fact that we're skipping all of Boston. But Quincy, Massachusetts is where the Adams presidents were from, and at least one of their houses, as I recall, and I think both of them, Braintree, is a National Historic Landmark.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So Cape Cod, can't go wrong. Lovely biking, beaches, and scenery. Mm-hmm. And here's a tip that's really important. You can go anywhere except south of Route 6 between Falmouth and Chatham, because that is where all the development is. But everywhere else, wonderful. In Falmouth, Woods Hole is an ocean research center, and there's a ferry to Martha's Vineyard. Mm-hmm. Very nice place to bike. You could do a day trip there. And Cape Cod, it actually looks like an arm when flexing your bicep.
Mm-hmm.
And the outer part has the Cape Cod National Seashore, which is 40 miles of beach with almost no development. And really, really pretty. And for people who are interested in literature, I mentioned Thoreau, connected with Walden Pond before. His Cape Cod is a fabulous book. If you visit Cape Cod afterwards, just read the book, and it's very cool. And the Marconi wireless station is located at the National Seashore. It's the site of the first transatlantic wireless communication with Europe. Wellfleet, which is further up, going towards the tip, has great oysters. And Provincetown at the tip is a summer destination for LGBTQ, and it's extremely lively.
It is a party town.
Yes, be prepared to see some flesh. I'd say that. The last place that I'll mention is actually one of my favorite places, and it's Nantucket. It's further out there. I would recommend a good 2 days if you're going to go. And it has 800 pre-Civil War homes. It's very wealthy, so the landscaping is really pretty. And they have small little niche museums, such as the Lightship Basket Museum. There's a life-saving station, which was actually a system along the coast to look out for shipwrecks so people could help save people. There's several African American sites. The oldest functioning mill in the country from 1746. And I like the fishermen cottages in Sconset. They're very picturesque. And Nantucket, it has 110 miles of beaches.
Right.
I haven't keyed on this. Massachusetts is not known as a place with beaches just because it's further north and it's cold. But if you like a beautiful beach, you are not going to be disappointed. What I like to do is to just bike on the trafficless paths around the island. There's a lot of dirt roads to get lost on. And Cisco Brewery has a very fun beer tasting. Rather than telling you when to come, I will say don't come in July and August. There's a lot of people with second homes, and prices can go up to about $1,000 a night for lodging. The shoulder seasons are much more affordable.
I think I have been there in August and had a great time, but it's been a while. I remember we biked around the island on tandem bikes with our kids. In fact, I think one of the original photos for the Amateur Traveler logo, for those of you who've listened for a long time, had a picture of me and my daughter on a bike, or my son and I on a bike. I can't even remember who was on it. And that picture was taken in Nantucket. It's a great island for biking around. As you said, the only thing I don't like is that the downtown is cobblestones. So that does not work as well for the biking. But other than that, it was a beautiful place.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I did not mention, there's a good organization called Historic New England with 22 historic homes in Massachusetts. So that you could check out that site too for those people who are looking to look into different historic styles. Excellent.
Well, this show is already going to require me to do much more Googling and putting together of links than any other show we have done in recent time. Is there anything else we want to cover?
No, actually, no.
I could not keep up with you. So,
as I mentioned before, I really tried to whittle down from different attractions to come up with this. People have cycled through many generations. People have gone to the Midwest, and the traces remain.
Excellent. Or for people who are interested in more information on some things we talked about, I know I have links that I'll put in the show notes for 6 national parks near Boston, which will include Lowell and Saugus Ironworks. And then I have a whole separate post on Saugus Ironworks, including some video that shows that in operation. I'll have some other links in the show notes as well, because I'm sure I'm forgetting other spots. As we get to our wrap-up questions, Henry, you were standing in the prettiest spot in Massachusetts. Where are you standing? When are you there? And what are you looking at?
Okay. I gave this a lot of thought, and I am going to say the top of Mount Sugarloaf in South Deerfields, looking towards the south in the fall. And you're seeing the Connecticut River with rich farmland on the sides towards the Seven Sisters mountain range.
Excellent.
And that was actually included in the Mel Gibson movie Edge of Darkness.
Okay.
As a random side note.
I do not remember the Mel Gibson movie Edge of Darkness, so okay. And one thing that makes you laugh and say only in Massachusetts.
Even if you're going somewhere a couple minutes away, you miss your right turn, you're going to drive for a half hour more.
The roads in especially Eastern Mass are, well, they were laid out by cow paths and carts and horses, and driving on them with cars doesn't always make sense.
If you're not used to it, you are going to feel like you're hanging out for dear life. I mean, if you get off the main roads in Eastern Mass, you're going down like these side streets, visibility is really poor. It's also fun. And I have heard that truck drivers from outside of Massachusetts really don't like delivering in Massachusetts for those reasons.
Yeah, especially in the built-up areas. Well, and in the winter, do that after a nor'easter or 2 or 3, as I have sometimes been in Massachusetts when they've had literally one winter, I think 5 years ago or something like that. They had a nor'easter every Wednesday. Big storms that pile up a lot of snow, and you basically lose a whole lane of traffic to the snowdrift. So it gets interesting to drive there in the winter.
Yeah, we just got a foot of snow a couple of days ago. And something that makes me laugh about Massachusetts is that you can see people jogging through nor'easters.
Good fun. Well, and there is history everywhere. And the one thing that I would say, Massachusetts for U.S., we're talking about a country that doesn't have as much history as some other places in the world, has more history per square foot than just about anywhere. Excellent. And if you had to summarize Massachusetts in 3 words, what 3 words would you use? Nature, history, and culture. Excellent. Excellent. Good words. Our guest again has been Henry Suski. And Henry, thank you so much for coming on Amateur Traveler. You don't have, I believe, a blog that you're wanting to promote at this time? I do not. I'm just promoting travel and making friends wherever people go. Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for Massachusetts. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Before we get into the commentary for the community for this show, yes, I did realize after we finished the recording that the string of parks around Boston is the Emerald Necklace. So you don't need to write and remind me. Thanks go out to the patrons of the show, including Henry, who helps support the show on a monthly basis. If you also want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. And a special thanks goes out to Cindy Carlson, who just started supporting the show. David commented on the recent episode we did on the Virginia coast and said she skipped right over Hamilton and the history of NASA, the Virginia Air and Space Museum with Apollo 12 capsule, plus Newport News and the Mariners Museum and the USS Monitor. There are a lot of things we skipped over in Virginia. Virginia, like Massachusetts, like this show, has so much to see. It is a fascinating state. And David, you are quite correct. We skipped all those things. Catching up a bit again on recent reviews. These are coming from October that we got for the podcast in Apple Podcasts. Angus Runner says, whenever I travel somewhere, I look to see if Chris has an episode about the location. I've gotten many good tips and ideas from his show. Very thorough episodes about each location, and his guests are top-notch. And then I heard also from Nomad CK, who wrote about the episode on Chennai. As a transplanted Chennaiite, I enjoyed this episode very much. All the important locations were covered nicely. Just wanted to add the tuk-tuk is called an auto rickshaw, and the locals hail one by clapping their hands and shouting, "Auto!" Thanks so much. I can just picture that. I did get the quote for the Amateur Traveler trip to Turkey, which is planning to be in September of 2021. And so we'll be getting that information out to the amateurtraveler.com/trips private Facebook group first, and then also out to the patrons. Usually it'll go to the patrons first. We do have people who signed up for last year's trip who will have priority for this particular one. And then it'll also go out to the email newsletter before I announce it on the show. So if you want to get access to it sooner, join the newsletter, join the private Facebook group, or obviously become a patron. I updated the list of Amateur Traveler affiliates recently. Some of the city passes went away as there's been contraction for sure in terms of the travel industry here in 2020 in going into 2021. But take a look at those if you're interested in getting a pass for a local city that you're going to, especially Dublin, Helsinki, London, Paris, Rome, or Stockholm. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.